taxi driver, every shoe shine boy, every newspaper vendor, they all were dealing in thousands of bushels of wheat. It was all a speculative market. It was stacks and stacks of paper, but there was no substance to it. Some of that wheat couldn't have been grown. I don't suppose it's been grown yet. They were dealing in millions of bushels. It didn't exist anywhere. It was paper prosperity.
If the 20s roared anywhere in North America, it was in British Columbia. The province glittered with opportunity meeting the world demand for raw resources. Production increased, markets expanded, profits soared. Foreign capital paved the way to foreign markets. Dependent but prosperous, the future looked good in the Golden West, until October 1929.
This station master, I can always remember him coming out with his chalk-like face saying, it's a disaster, it's a disaster. The bottom's falling out of the market. There's a panic on.
No markets meant no production. Jobless figures skyrocketed, but the country's new leader had a message of hope for the Canadian people.
Canadians, by their heroic achievements upon the battlefields of France and Flanders, made for our dominion a place amongst the nations of the world. They are now engaged in a struggle for the agricultural and industrial development of their country, believing that if afforded an equal opportunity with their competitors, they can provide employment for Canadians in their own country, supply in large measure our domestic requirements, and
not unlike a total war effort, the Depression was a universal experience. Every family could count at least one of its members among the unemployed. By 1932, 1 in every 4 people were without jobs in Canada.
It wasn't just working class people who were unemployed and trying to get around on relief. It was middle class people. Teachers were out of work, and business people were out of work, and they began to lose everything. You know, first the car, and then the house if they owned it, or if they didn't own it, they would be evicted if they weren't paying rent. And the middle class people were very bewildered by this and very ashamed because they didn't know how to feed their children unless they went on relief, and yet they hated to ask for relief.
The girls in many ways had a rougher time of it even than men. They had real difficulties getting relief. They wound up doing housework for nothing, working on farms for nothing, doing housework. In many instances, relief authorities were that hard-boiled. Young girls were told, you're good looking, what the hell are you doing here, get out of here.
But the biggest problem was obviously that of the single men. I mean, supposing you were a young man in a family and you would get no relief. The family would get so many coupons and food tickets for those who were under 18, you see. But if you were older, you would be scrounging on the family relief tickets. So you got out of the house.
Anyone who lived or worked anywhere near a railway couldn't fail to see the signs.
With nothing at home, there was still a world out there, a chance for adventure. Maybe try for a job on the prairies, or drift to the coast with newfound friends.
From the summer of 1929 on, and it certainly didn't stop during the winters. There was a constant procession all across the country. It made no difference whether they were going east or west, but there was literally thousands of dispossessed and out of work and rather hopeless people traveling on the top of boxcars. Every freight train had its quota, and the direction didn't seem to matter. A young man dropping off a freight train looking for work in a small village or town with his pack-sack on his back wouldn't be in town very long before the local police would inform him if he was still hanging around that town at sundown, he would wind up in jail.
In Vancouver, the job was organized to demand better relief conditions. City and provincial authorities were quick to act. This was a national crisis, they charged. The solution must come from the national government. And so it did.
And eventually you had to, if you wanted relief, you had to go to a relief camp at 20 cents a day and chop rocks.
With the help of the Canadian Army, Prime Minister Bennett brought down a plan for a national relief camp system. Single jobless men would be isolated from population centers, their activities controlled. They would be unable to organize. Everyone was happy with this solution. Everyone, that is, except the unemployed.
Relief camps were relief camps, and you almost had to live in them in order to understand it. The food was mediocre. The camps in the main were in isolation, tar paper shacks, all of them. The atmosphere, 20 cents a day, it led to tremendous dissatisfaction. You felt as if you were disowned and deserted, and they just dumped you in the worst possible places.
Part of the Caribou Road and the new highway up to Harrison Hot Springs, for instance, there's a bypass was cut out of solid rock there with hand drills at 20 cents a day. And then the Peace Arch, of course, was a plum. They did all the landscaping around the Peace Arch monument. All that was done with shovels and wheelbarrows and picks. To me, it's no longer a monument to the great undefended border of everlasting peace. To me, it's a monument to slave labor by men working at 20 cents a day.
Some entertainment served as a social safety valve, churning out optimism at the bleakest hour.
The great campaign put on by the Junior Board of Trade in Calgary, they thought they would revive people's confidence by just ignoring the fact that the Depression was still on, so they came out with a campaign where they asked everybody to put on a bumper sticker, and this was in February or March of 1933, and the bumper sticker read, "Wasn't the Depression terrible?" The inference was that happy days are here again, the Depression was over, and good times were no longer just around the corner, they were here.
1933 held another reality. Average income for workers was nearly half that of 1929, and unemployment was at its highest peak in Canadian history. 1933 also saw the birth of a new political party. Its purpose, a new social order. The Co-operative Commonwealth Federation, under the leadership of J.S. Woodsworth, brought together farmers and workers. The CCF believed at that time that the capitalist system was responsible for the prevailing conditions. They proposed a 4-point program including a planned economy and equal distribution of income, socialized medicine and health care, a national labor code to ensure minimum wages, unemployment insurance, old age pensions, and a federal emergency works program to alleviate unemployment. The CCF supported the demands of the Relief Camp Workers Union.
The slogan was a very simple one: work and wages. That's what we wanted, and it was a popular slogan, and we wanted the camps closed. We wanted to be put to work on constructive work and be given trade union rates of pay, and it was just that simple.
Well, the people who took the responsibility of organizing the unemployed to protest against the condition all during the Depression had to be the people who first of all understood it. And to them it was not any dip in the business cycle. To them it was a part of a great class struggle where the dispossessed were either going to organize for a better life or they were going to have to accept the treatment they were now receiving, and that would last until they were needed for a war.
The Workers' Unity League put forward a platform of comprehensive demands: a 5-day work week, equal pay for equal work for women, and such unheard-of demands as unemployment insurance and old age pensions. They were responsible for organizing the Relief Camp Workers' Union.
The whole environment led to dissatisfaction and rebelliousness. The camps were under the Department of National Defense, and you were issued with fatigue clothes, and you were under the rules of the Army. And the minute you opened your mouth about organization, you were down the road.
In April 1935, the Relief Camp Workers' Union arrived in Vancouver to press the local government with their demands. Ethnic groups and trade unions raised funds for the cause of the men. Public support was overwhelming.
We meet today in freedom's song and raise our voices high. We'll join our hands in union strong to battle or to die. Hold the fort, for we are coming, union men be strong. Side by side we battle onward, victory will come. Those my comrades see the union banner waving.
Mayor McGeer appealed to the Prime Minister.
Our funds are exhausted, and we cannot do anything more than we have done. We cannot force the relief camp strikers to go back to the camp. We cannot hold the situation any further without resorting to force.
In the course of that demonstration, I got picked up and charged with unlawful assembly for leading a parade through the Hudson Bay store. There were certain things you could do and other things that the system frowned on very heavily.
In desperation, Mayor McGeer appealed again to the Prime Minister. Bennett's answer served only to fan the flames. And while provincial authorities nationwide provided options, private industry would not. The Premier of British Columbia, although sharing the contention of the Relief Camp Workers' Union that unemployment was a federal responsibility, ultimately refused a direct provincial aid program. To underline his position, Pattullo used an expression common of the day.
So somebody came up with the brainwave that we should move the battle to Ottawa. And lo and behold, one night, 1,000 of us piled onto a freight train here, just down the street here a little ways, and started out.
The relief camp strikers picked up numbers as they moved east. Under the leadership of Arthur Evans, a delegation went ahead to Ottawa to present their demands: a work and wages program, a system of unemployment insurance, the right to organize, and the right to vote. July 1st, 1935, Dominion Day. A bloody clash ensued in Regina. Canadians by now had identified R.B. Bennett with all of the problems and none of the solutions of the Depression. His mishandling of the Regina Riot was the proverbial last straw that broke the camel's back. When he went to the people in a general election in October 1935, his Conservative Party was wiped from office.
Mackenzie King was much sharper than R.B. Bennett. He closed the camps, and the first year in Western Canada, he put the boys on extra gang on the railroad, gave them 2 bits an hour. That only lasted a few months, and then he cut that out, and then he made available a farm scheme where you could go to work for a farmer, and that way the single unemployed were isolated on farms by themselves, and Mackenzie King didn't have as much trouble with the unemployed as Bennett did.
Wary of the power of the organized unemployed and mindful of their public support, Mackenzie King closed the relief camps in 1936. This temporary solution seemed to calm the political horizon. Because King favored relations with the United States over the United Kingdom, Canadians felt that the United States' New Deal was also in store for them. Public spirit had hit rock bottom, and good news was welcome. Economic activity picked up. Many unemployed found work and joined the intense cross-country campaign to organize workers into unions. The experience of the early 1930s had shown Canadians the necessity of working-class unity and organization. Political energies were also devoted to supporting struggles against fascism in Europe. A volunteer army known as the Mackenzie Papineau Battalion left Canada in 1936 to fight fascism in Spain. However, all was not well on the labor front. Conditions worsened. The headlines at the end of 1937 did not evoke dismay. They caused bitterness and anger. People found themselves on the street again, with no options but to rely on public charity. Would Canadians see another 1929?
Frequently, tag days were held. This is where they asked the public in the larger cities to help them. They would tin can on the streets. They would have a tin can and ask for money.
Thrust into a vicious circle with no options of work, the unemployed were denied relief, harassed for begging, and systematically carted off to jail. Their anger mounted.
We had the same attitude to those young men as the Americans had to some of their anti-war demonstrators, you know, over the Vietnam thing. These weren't hobos. They were young men who belonged to families all over Canada. So the families were supporting them.
One young veteran of the relief system was heard to say,
ever since the time you were 16, you'd bummed around. If every job you went after, there were 100 other guys there ahead of you. If you lived life like that for the past 6 years, how'd you like it?
After years of drifting back and forth across Canada, getting the same reception everywhere that no one wanted to take any responsibility for a solution to unemployment, it had always been my feeling that somebody should take some action that would involve all levels of government.
Yeah, it was a desperate situation. The government reached to help the transients and at the same time offered no return ticket to the prairies. And the prairie provinces screamed, we don't want you anyway. The situation there was as worse or the same as it was here. The only legal thing that we could do was lie down and quietly starve to death. So a group of the unemployed finally got together, staged a sit-down in the post office to force the federal government, in particular, to do something.
Their first suggestion was that now that we'd had such a nice, peaceable demonstration that we should all go home, forgetting that if we'd had homes in the first place, we wouldn't be occupying those buildings.
Hold the fort, for we are coming, Union men be strong. Side by side we battle onward, victory will come. Look, my comrades, see the Union banners waving high.
Oh, occasionally a sergeant would wander in and say, But why don't you break all this up, Steve? You've had a good demonstration now. Why not save yourself a whole lot of trouble and just tell the boys all to quit and go somewhere else? Because we don't want to have to come in here and smash your heads, and I say we don't want it either. So why don't you carry out your job? Do your job, carry out the law. Arrest us and have us tried. Oh, well, we can't go through that bullshit. I say, well, let me explain the law in Canada to you. Policemen arrest. Magistrates and judges punish. You're unemployed in Canada, you're subject to order, but you're not subject to law.
With many injured and their leader in hospital, the men in their rage moved through the streets, breaking shop windows as they went. As news of the eviction spread, public opinion rapidly galvanized into action. An hour later, 10,000 people gathered in a downtown park, the Powell Street grounds. Speakers at the rally decried the eviction as a brutal course of action and demanded the resignation of the government. As night fell, public anger continued to mount. Harold Winch, a provincial member of Parliament, spoke to the insistent crowd shortly before they dispersed. Further violence was avoided on Vancouver's Bloody Sunday. But the problems of the decade remained unresolved.
We're heaven blessed with plenty of the very best of every single thing. So let's all rise and sing. We're proud of Canada, how thankful we should be. From broad Pacific swell unto the shores of the Atlantic blue, we're proud of